What time is it?
Okay, we have some fabulous live music later on, but right now, here's the kind I prefer.
Good day, everyone. This is Shad with West Coast Styles. In this latest feature interview, I have the pleasure and privilege of interviewing Mr. Douglas Century. Doug is a New York Times bestselling author and Princeton University alum. In addition to his numerous critically acclaimed works about true crime, he is also a true hip hop head whose coverage on the subject has gotten him published in, among other places, Billboard, Blender, Vibe, and Rolling Stone. Just last month, he had two books hit shelves. One is The Last Boss of Brighton, which is about the rise and fall of Boris Biba Mayfield, a notorious Russian mob boss. And the other is Split Decision, a memoir from entertainment icon Ice-T and his friend Spike, and how certain things that they did and didn't do placed them on separate paths, but ultimately affected them for the rest of their lives. Doug, thank you for making time in your busy schedule to speak with me. It is truly appreciated and a wonderful honor.
Well, Shad, you and I've been on Twitter back and forth. It's a pleasure to virtually meet you, but it's a real pleasure to be on your show. And thanks for plugging both of these books. They're different publishers, but that's The Last Boss of Brighton by myself for HarperCollins, and the one that you and I are going to talk about today, Split Decision, Ice-T and Spike. Spike is they're doing time. Ice is there looking, this is really the split of their lives. And I'm the co-author of this one and telling their stories. So thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. So starting things off, what came first, an interest in writing or an interest in the topics you wrote about?
Oh, I was a kid writing little science fiction books, and trying to write Dr. Seuss books when I was 4. I've always wanted to be an author. It's so goofy, actually, but your junior high yearbook or whatever, and what your ambition is. I found mine the other day and I was showing it to my boy and I was like, it says his ambition is to be an author. And I said, I've always wanted to do this. So I always wanted to write. I thought it'd be a novelist. Mm-hmm. And then I got into journalism, and I studied creative writing at Princeton. I studied writing. And then, journalism, I was living in New York City. Everything was just blowing up for me. Like hip hop was I had heard hip hop, of course. My first hip hop record was I know which one I bought. 1985, I bought LL Cool J's Radio, big boombox on the cover.
Oh yeah.
And I think I told you, first time I really, I'd heard Run DMC, I'd heard that stuff, I'd heard Grandmaster Flash, but I was at a party at Princeton and Rock the Bells came on, mm-hmm. and it just blew my mind, right? So anyway, when I'm living in New York, I got there about 88, 89. And then, everybody knows 90, 91, 92, New York hip hop was just exploding, and you had all this diversity of talent. And I started to write about it. I started to go to the shows. I started to get interviews with hip hop artists. And so, then I started to just make a living as a writer. So it wasn't all planned, but I'd always wanted to do it.
No, that's awesome. Who was your first hip hop interview?
Oh gosh, I'm trying to think about it. Some of the early ones I did, though, I interviewed LL Cool J. Went to a movie with LL Cool J when he was in this movie. When he was in this movie Deep Blue Sea, I don't know if you remember. He was in a movie.
Yeah, with the Sharks.
Yeah,
Sharks fan.
So I'm in the New York Times. I got this. This was not the first one by any means, but they said, you want to go to a movie with LL Cool J? And I was like, okay. Like, what does that entail? And you can Google it. It's called The Out of Sight Rapper. It was Hot 97 was doing a giveaway. And I, hung out with LL a little bit, and he goes, I don't want to see it at a screening. I want to see it with the folks, like with the people, So there were like 4 seats held for a couple of his friends, maybe his manager and me. And we waited till the lights went down, and then we just went and sat down. And I'll never forget, he was yelling at the screen. He went and got hot dogs in the middle of the movie. And it was just like, nobody knew he was there till like the end. And it was so chilled because he got to see the audience reaction. He's a guy from Queens, and he was just like Ice. He's the most legit guy. Matter of fact, everybody knows he works out. He's so health conscious. I get this call after I wrote the article. Todd wants to, his name is Todd. Yeah. Do you want to have breakfast with him at the Royalton or something? And 7 a.m. breakfast, he's eating oatmeal and fruit. And he's asking me what you asked me. Like, what's it like to be a writer? He's the big star. He's a movie star. He's a legend in hip hop. He's really a curious man. And I found that the real ones, the real live dudes that you get to spend time with, they're not about the bullshit. They're not about kiss my ass or anything like that. But I was lucky, man. 90s hip hop. I tell these kids now who weren't born until 2002 and they worship Biggie and Pac. I said, I saw Biggie. Like, I mean, literally at the New Music Seminar before there was a war between, Bad Boy and Death Row. I remember I met Suge Knight. I got Suge Knight's business card, and we were just networking. And out Puffy was at that time still called Puffy, and he had guides with placards. Like at that time it was Flavor in Your Ear was the first Bad Boy release, right?
Yep.
And he had all his folks walking around with these, like, it said, who is BIG, and Flavor in Your Ear. And I remember seeing Biggie was one of the guys out in front, like he was just ready to get his career going. So I was like, who are you telling about this stuff, man? I was there. I went to a Wu-Tang show, and I swear to God, I thought I was going to get trampled to death, because that they had probably done shows in Staten Island, but I think this was one of their first big hip hop shows at a club called Mars. And I was like, well, who's the Wu-Tang Clan? And they came out 50 motherfuckers deep, like boom. And everybody was like, is this a group or a gang? They were brilliant. They all got their individual deals. Like they came out as a collective, but then each one of them got their own deals with different labels, and now they're legendary. But at the time it was just like, nobody had seen a hip hop group that big.
Did 36 Chambers come out at that point?
It might it wasn't on my radar. I think I saw what year did that come out? 93?
93. Yep, came out the same day as Midnight Marauders.
Okay, so that was the New Music Seminar of 93. So the album had probably dropped, but it wasn't on my radar yet. But just all the stuff that is now considered the great 90s era. Like, I'll never forget, I was hanging out with guys from Brooklyn, and Brooklyn had its various sounds, right? You had Biggie, but you also, well, Biggie wasn't out yet, but you had like Black Moon, these guys doing that backpack kind of rap, like that grimy. You had DJ Premier, Gangstar sound. And then when we heard Snoop on Deep Cover, I think that was the first time we heard that flow. And New York guys were just blown away. Like New York felt like it owned hip hop. And then we started to hear Dre's beats. And I remember when the Chronic dropped, I think guys still probably had cassettes. It just changed the whole game. So I remember seeing all of that stuff live, man. It was wild. But my first hip hop interview must have been around 92, 91, 92. And I'd have to go back through my clippings and just go, who was it? But I mean, as a working journalist, you just, you get the call. Do you want to go interview so-and-so? There you are with your little recorder, and you've done it too, man.
I can totally relate. When you and I were talking about hip hop before, which I thought was really cool, you mentioned a lot of stuff kind of from that kind of predated the 90s, just as far as just party raps and stuff, which I use this term very respectfully, but I say this to educate people. I think these are artists or songs that may be written off as novelties now, but they really had an impact in terms of like crossing hip hop over. You talked about Joeski Loves, Pee Wee Dance, Chub Rock, Popeye Tune. What type of effect did that have on you? How did you kind of get introduced to that?
Well, that was the point when like MTV was still playing videos. You had Yo MTV Raps, right? Well, maybe that came a little bit later, but like in New York, there was Video Music Box, which was like on a it wasn't even cable really then. But so you had 87, Ice-T had been out, right? 87 Rhyme Pace. You had the hard, like, to me, the hardest sounding guy ever was Rakim. And he didn't even have to curse.
He didn't even have to yell.
He didn't have to yell, but he had that cadence. So that's happening. And maybe early Boogie Down Productions, all this stuff. And then you'd be at a party, or you turn on and you'd see this guy going, be like Pee Wee Herman, act like a jerk. And you'd see that crazy dance from Pee Wee's Big Adventure. Popeye Tune, Chub Rock, big underrated. He was kind of Biggie. He was big. He was kind of Biggie before Biggie, right? Like he was doing that Brooklyn, and I think he was just a brilliant rapper. That effect was that it made hip hop feel a lot more like a big tent. Like there was all kinds of stuff. You could be into the goofy raps, but let's call them novelties, right? But it wasn't all one like thing, like all gangster. It wasn't all, I always say this. What I loved about when I know Ice is really one of the pioneers of West Coast, King T, and but what we really feel as the West Coast sound was Dre's beats. NWA coming out, Dre's production sound, and I always say you have to have lived in New York to understand the difference. Dre makes music that's just amazing to drive in your car. And DJ Premier and Pete Rock, they made music for your headphones to be on like samples, all kinds of crazy samples, layers of stuff, because everybody's riding the subway. And I always felt like the New York hip hop was more for the, my favorite would be DJ Premier for his beats.
Oh yeah.
But it's just a different vibe, right? It's a different different sound, but it was just great. I just don't feel it in today's hip hop. I don't feel the diversity. I don't feel that it might exist because I may not know everything, but everybody sort of is sounding a bit like Drake. Like right now, there's a lot of people doing the same, whether it's trap or drill or whatever they call it. It's just, and it's probably what sells, or it's what they feel is popular. But yeah, trust me, before you guys a lot of people were born, hip hop had so many different sounds to it. And it was at that point by 88, got to remember, like when did, so they were still thinking it was a fad, like when Sugar Hill Gang came out, those early rappers, I think everybody kept saying, when is this rap fad going to end? Right. And for me, and I know for Ice-T, the minute you knew it wasn't really a phase was when Run DMC hit. And I think I said they sold out the arenas in LA. I mean, I don't remember, that tour was 84, maybe 80. Yeah. I mean, the Beastie Boys had done it too, but Ice says in Split Decision, he goes and sees the Beastie Boys and said, I mean, they got laser shows. This is rock and roll. And, so by 88, I still kind of remember people saying, well, that hip hop stuff, it's going to, no, it's a multi-billion-dollar empire. It's never going anywhere. It's the new rock and roll. To me, it's like, I always predicted that white kids would be, it's not just Eminem. There's a lot of great white rappers, but I always predicted that it's a pattern in American culture. The blues was black music, strictly African-American music.
Yep.
White guys started to play it. And as soon as white guys started to play a lot of the blues, if you go to see a blues artist now in Chicago or whatever, it'll be a largely white crowd. And then half with jazz, half with rock and roll, was as Ice-T says in Body Count, the original song Body Count, black music was rock and roll. Little Richard, Chuck Berry. And now by the 60s, black people were moving more into funk into soul, and then it funk. And I was like, you know what? At some point, like, just white kids are going to embrace hip hop, and they're going to start being the leading MCs like Jack Harlow. And it might mutate into a different culture that white people haven't understood yet. I don't know if that'll happen, but we're in an era now where I think hip hop is rock and roll. It is the dominant youth culture by far.
I think in my lifetime, or just in my time of being a fan of hip hop, I've seen it go from from that racial standpoint, from like white kids imitating black culture to now it's no longer imitation. It's just who they are. It's just what they were raised on. I mean, I remember talking to Jazzy Jeff one time, just talking about, raps from the 80s. And I said made some question about, something about, do parents still not understand? And he gave the best answer. And he just said, now these parents grew up on hip hop. Now, I mean, then that might not get today's hip hop, but the kids today have parents that grew up on Parents Just Don't Understand, that grew up on Run DMC, that grew up on Curtis Blow. So that cultural divide, although it still certainly is there's certainly a difference between, say, like a Young Thug and an LL Cool J, but that still is closer than what it was in the generation prior.
Absolutely. And the Super Bowl this year was the first time hip hop really took over the Super Bowl, right? And my brother is a musicologist. He's a professor of music. His students were really into the show. But he called me and said, can I ask you a question about that show? And I said, what do you mean? Why was everybody 50, 55, 49? And I said, well, no, Kendrick Lamar. He said, but he's 30. He's 35. I said, well, this wasn't a hip hop show. This was an aftermath show. This was Dre's stable, right? Yeah. But Ice-T said it on Jimmy Fallon right before the book came out. He said, because Ice-T's on the Cheerios boxes now. He's doing Geico. He's doing everything. And he said, you know what's changed? It's the people running all these big Fortune 500 companies are 45, 50 years old. They grew up with our music. They're not afraid of us. It used to be impossible to imagine a Snoop or a guy like Ice, who's, whose stock in trade is controversy, cop
Yeah.
killer, fuck, well, NWA, fuck the police. It's almost impossible to imagine them having corporate sponsorship deals the way these guys do now, because they were the scary dudes, right?
Yeah.
They were the scary, but they're not scary to your to guys who are 35, 40, 45. They are. That's what I listened. The first song I ever heard, that I really loved was "First of the Month" by Bone Thugs or something.
Yeah.
Like, I have a friend here. I'm in Canada right now, and I have a friend who's really into hip hop, and he goes, I said, "What's your favorite all time hip hop song?" He goes, "It'd have to be Bone Thugs' First of the Month." And I said, I mean, it's a good song, but that's interesting. He goes, "It's just the first song I heard when I was in 6th grade that I really related to. And, it's the first of the month." And I was like, it's interesting. That's coming of age music now. And I was already an old guy, and I was in New York, a fully grown up man, when I was like, what is this flow, these guys? When the Bone Thugs, well, we're getting technical about cadences. I don't know if you
it's
want
all good, man.
I mean, I remember, like, Ice even says this when I started to hear guys like Tretch. Remember the complexity of Tretch's raps, and then you had Fushnikens and Das Effects, and it started to get more. And then Bone Thugs, the tongue twisters kind of phenomenon started to get so much more complex. I said, if this is the direction hip hop's going, I'm just going to be a storyteller, because I can't. That's a cadence I can't get to. It's so fast, right?
Mhm.
When I interviewed Busta Rhymes, I think I showed you that article in the. Busta has one of the most rapid fire, and I think I asked, do you think you got that from being Jamaican? Because the Jamaican patois, the DJs in dancehall culture have been doing that fast. He goes, yeah, definitely. My style is influenced a lot by the Jamaican culture, and that to me shows you the guys like Busta and Biggie, who are of Jamaican descent. They're really a throwback to Kool Herc. I mean, Kool Herc, Jamaican. He brought it. Flash was a Caribbean guy. So a lot of that stuff in the Bronx was Caribbean guys, a lot of Puerto Ricans. A lot of Puerto Ricans were very influential DJs and stuff. So to see that West Indian stuff come back, like Biggie's flow, Biggie throws a lot of Jamaicanness in his. And his mom, she, have you heard Viola Wallace? She's got a Jamaican accent. It's just that generation of dude from Brooklyn, they could flip it. They can talk American if they want to talk American, and then they can talk Jamaican. It's their code switch,
You were talking about Busta's performance too, and I think that Jamaican culture, I mean, you just kind of see that energy, come through in that. And I mean, even Biggie too, given his stature, but being a bigger guy, like he still, if you see footage of him performing, there's something, he still had that it factor.
Oh, they were there. The energy level was off the charts. But Busta would, if you ever see the Jamaican dudes will they'll get away with it. They'll rock a canary yellow vest, canary yellow socks. And Busta would sometimes have those really wild, loud colors. I mean, and again, and I hear these kids now that weren't even born, and you're at a party, they want to hear Scenario. They want to hear that Tribe Called Quest. And when Busta comes on with that verse, you're just like, what the hell did he just do?
Again,
I mean, it's legendary. It's legendary. And I'm really impressed by the younger generation who really are knowledgeable about hip hop. They'll put on "Can I Kick It?" Yes, you can. Like they know that's the high point. Maybe I know that 90s stuff is maybe it peaked for a lot of people.
Well,
I mean,
I think some of the artists today make a really strong point of referencing their influences and being like, well, just using Kendrick Lamar, for example, To Pimp a Butterfly. I mean, so many people wouldn't know who Thundercat was if Kendrick didn't make a point of shouting him out and making like, hey, this is this, and this is a Tupac sample at the end. And this is, he's really made a point of saying, these are the influences that I draw from. And then because of his large following, I think a lot of, true fans will kind of just do the math, for lack of a better word, just kind of do the math backwards. And that's exposed them to a lot of music. And I mean, Tribe Called Quest turned me on to jazz music.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't have known squat about it if I didn't read the credits to those albums.
What was it? The Low End Theory? I'm trying to remember. Yeah, they brought I mean, I was just listening to Vibrant Thing, which wasn't Tribe, it was just Q-Tip. But yeah, I mean, there was so much, I don't know, more subtlety for me. You'd have that jazzy. I mean, Guru did a whole album, Jazzmatazz,
Yeah.
and he had that whole movement, right? And I mean, it might still be going on because I can't claim to know all about underground rap, but I know when I heard Jack Harlow's first records, I said, yeah, he's just trying to be himself. And then this First Class, which was like the #1 hit on Billboard, I said, he sounds like he's trying to be a bit more like Drake. It was a little more commercial for me. And I was like, I get it. You got to make music with the singing hook. You got to make it, there's something, but it's sort of flattening it all out for me, whereas it used to be like, yeah, jazz, whatever happened to the experimentation? I mean, and I guess, also I was in New York in the Wild West days of production when guys would just sample shit on their MPC 60 and not worry about clearing it. That's why everybody was getting sued, like, you didn't clear that sample. You didn't clear that sample. People didn't even think about it. But I'm pretty sure now anybody who goes to make a record, they're like, well, can I sample this? I mean, it's
you can never make Paul's Boutique today.
Nope. And in fact, just getting to the book, Spike had a deal, production deal. So Ice is, of course, a well-known rapper by then, but Spike was making beats, and he said, dude, I made these crazy beats, and I sampled the Beatles, I forget which, She Loves You or I Want to Hold Your Hand, just the hook. And he goes, yeah, but then I had to call Capitol Records and try to clear it. And I was like, Spike, good luck clearing a Beatles sample. Like, he goes, well, I didn't think of it. But I mean, to his point, this was probably in 89, 90.
Yeah.
You're not really thinking back in those days, but, well, can I get the rights to this song? It was about making it, right? And one of the most interesting guys,
that part of the book too. That was very interesting.
One of the most interesting guys I hung out with for Billboard, this is more recent, was Scott Storch down in Miami.
Oh,
and yeah, I went down there, and Jewish guy was he fucked up his career with drugs. Like, he had a bad reputation in the industry for just flaking out, but he was on his road to this comeback that he's on now. And I just sat with the guy, and he showed me how he wrote. He can play the piano like Billy Joel. He's just a naturally gifted pianist. Started off with the Roots. Was just a little geeky Jewish kid who was in the Roots, but I'm just watching him. A lot of those great Dre riffs, forgot about Dre. He just showed me how he played them, and I said, see, this is one of the ways that guys kind of went beyond samples. They started to really create amazing hooks from artistry, just from a gifted pianist figuring it out. So,
for what it's worth, my only critique or criticism or observation about the Super Bowl halftime show is when they did Still DRE, I would have loved to see Scott Storch on the piano, because, like, to me, that's just as much his record as it is Dre.
Oh yeah.
And not to take anything away from Dre at all, but I've just heard stories about how that came together and how he was just at the piano and just came up with that, and like, I just would have loved to see him sitting there at a keyboard.
He did, and he was pretty remorseful when I hung out with him in Miami, because he'd kind of fucked up. I mean, I think he was on pretty good terms with Dre, but he had this year. That's why Billboard wanted me to do it, where he had 7 or 8. It was like Chris Brown. He had Fat Joe lean back. And Fat Joe was still on good terms with him. But a lot of people, I mean, there was this story that, when you're on cocaine, you just don't know what you're doing. So
yeah.
But I think he kept Janet Jackson waiting. Yeah, I wrote about this in the article. He kept Janet Jackson waiting a whole day in a studio back in the days when you paid for, expensive studio time. You don't leave Janet Jackson waiting. And it was like, so record companies, he got a reputation, which is really, really, really unfortunate because he's so gifted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it would have been great and to actually see it played, up there. Yeah, Scott contributed a lot to that Chronic album. And, but Dre's got to go down as the greatest producer for me. I mean, I love DJ Premier. I fuck with him all the time, just on the creativity, but Dre's his influence is the way he changed everything.
And he did it like 3 times too.
Yeah. And I love that line where he basically says, because I've been in the lab with the pen and a pad. Yeah. Like he said, you think I stopped making music? I've just been like, he'll go away but take it. Eminem did too. Like, we talked about this. Eminem, you take a hiatus and then come back with this new thing, this new energy, and that's what the great ones do.
That was that was a fantastic piece you wrote. Thank you for sharing that with me. What was that? How did that article come about? Because it was based essentially just about Eminem in exile. Like that was the title. How did
Oh,
that?
I mean, this magazine Radar said to me, you like Eminem, and of course, at that point, who didn't like? I had seen him live. It was the MTV Music Awards, and one of my editors at the New York Times had a ticket, and she didn't want to go. So that was the one where he came in with like a white T-shirt and like 100 guys looking just like him.
Oh yeah,
I can't remember, but it was the
yeah,
MTV
the VMAs. I think that was
VMA. Sorry, VMAs, and it was that I'm the real Slim Shady. So I'd seen him live. I mean, crazy energy. And then by the time I wrote that article, everybody knew he'd been in rehab. And the magazine just said, do you know Detroit? And I said, no, my family's from Chicago, but I'm happy to go to Detroit. And I just started to go to first I went to Gilbert's Lodge where his, it's a pretty funny story. I'd heard he was a cook, what do you call it? A line cook. Yeah, and I go there, and it's the same Greek guy managed him, with restaurant manager. He goes, "Yeah, Marshall used to be in the kitchen. The guy's from D12. He'd rap out all the orders, And then he said to me, he always said he was going to make it. And I said, I used to hate the way his pants were hanging off his ass. I said, well, if you make it, the first thing you got to promise me, you'll buy yourself a fucking belt. I mean, and then I went to this Ruby Tuesdays where Kim was known to be drunk during the daytime, and I was just kind of looking for Eminem, and I knew where he was. He was behind his gated mansion, and people thought, was he turning into Elvis, late period Elvis? Well, no, he wasn't. He was getting his mind together. But that was an interesting article because I really researched the court records and the dysfunction he went through, the 15 different schools, Brain Damage, that song about D'Angelo Bailey. Fat kid named D'Angelo Bailey, bullied him daily. Yeah. And D'Angelo Bailey sued him, I think, but he really did put Eminem in a coma, like that bad brain damage. And then I'm telling my daughter about this, like how he's always talking about killing Kim in his records. And I said, you know what? I realized this rereading my article. Kim lived in Debbie's house as Marshall and Kim were stepsister for about a year. And then I was like, I didn't remember that until I reread my article. So the poor guy has been in the Munchausen's by proxy, his mother giving him drugs, giving him pills. That guy has had an incredibly complicated life. And then to have overcome it, I mean, amazed anybody wouldn't become a drug addict. Yeah. Because I'd heard, I couldn't use it in the article, but I'd heard from a couple people who'd been at like record release parties in New York that I didn't see this personally, but that like everybody was there swarming around, and he was just in a little VIP banquet with Kim, just being like all to himself and shy. And people said, you know what, his real personality is very shy. Like he's just, so he started taking drugs because you need to get over that stage fright, which is kind of dramatized a bit in 8 Mile. Mom's spaghetti. He vomits. People can't imagine Eminem with that theatrical persona. People can't imagine that this guy could deep down be very, very shy and insecure, right? So, when he came back with rehab, so I wrote that article. He hadn't made music since 2004. I wrote that article in 2008. 2009, he came out with some great new music. And then, I mean, we can't even imagine. Then he came back with like Rap God and now all this. All I would advise him, not that he's ever listening to me, is that fast. He's done that now like 3 times or whatever. That just incredible. And then it's almost like my brother, the professor, he said, so what do people consider that? And I said, well, at this point, he's just doing it to show that he can do it. And my brother said, oh, in jazz, because my brother's a jazz guy, he says, in jazz, we would call that empty virtuosity, meaning like just playing a fancy solo. Whereas, instead of just one bluesy note, Eminem could do anything. But that breathless, whatever it is, how many bars he's doing without stopping, and you're like, I get it. What was the last one he did? Godzilla. It's like you could do that, dude, but it's almost like
he did that. He did Speed 'em with Tech Nine. And he's done a couple other ones too.
I mean,
and Rap God.
Everybody knows his technique is flawless, and nobody can rap that fast, but I prefer his storytelling. I mean, just go back to a song like Stan. Yeah. And you're like, wow, like he tells this, it's a perfectly told story. And the punchline, I mean, people can't remember the first time you heard it, but the first time you heard it, you were like, what?
Yeah.
Like it's a twist. It's like a movie almost, right?
Well, I remember it was such a juxtaposition because it came right after the song Kill You on the Marshall Mathers LP. And so
Right.
you hear something that's just shock value. And then all of a sudden you hear this like perfectly structured song with a concept behind it. It evolves. It just, and then I love Kill You too. That's a great song, but they're just so opposite. That,
Yeah.
and just in the way but it worked. And
Which was it? When did you first get into him? With his first record?
yeah, with the Slim Shady LP. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
from Michigan, and
Yeah.
so like and again in a good way, like you couldn't not be introduced or exposed to Eminem. But like I remember hearing, I'm 35 now, so I remember being a kid and like hearing My Name Is, and I thought it was cool and it was catchy, and I mean I knew who Dr. Dre was, but I was just like, oh, it's just kind of just this catchy single or whatever. But then what really drew me to M was when I heard Guilty Conscience.
Yeah. Oh,
That
oh
was
my
the one that
God.
made me go, oh shit, like this dude's legit.
I played that for my daughter when she was too young. She's 19 now, but she kept wanting to hear it. She'd heard maybe I'm what's the one he did with Rihanna? Monster. Monster.
Well, there's Monster, and then there's I Love the Way You Lie.
Okay, she knew I Love the Way You Lie. But then I played her Guilty Conscience, and she just loved the back and forth. And she's like, "Can you play that one again?" It's such a, the way Dre, and then he starts pissing off Dre, Mr. Dre, Mr. NWA, and Dre loses his temper. It's like, but the thing that I think blew me away with Eminem, I was a fan, but I heard him. I was actually asked to go give a kind of guest lecture at a high school in a kind of wealthy upper Manhattan, Upper East Side. And I didn't know how I was going to talk about writing. So I brought in hip hop lyrics. I brought in Common Senses. I used to love her. I said, this is an allegory. If you don't want to study allegory, Shakespearean or whatever, this is an allegory. I said, I'm going to give you how great rappers can be. Remember Keith Murray, not beautifulest thing in the world, but he had this line. And I told these like 15, 16-year-old kids, and I said, they were probably into Eminem. And I said, Keith Murray, I wrote it on the blackboard or on the whiteboard, whatever. I'm the mad matador of metaphor. I said, you see what he did right there? He used a metaphor. I'm a matador about metaphor. He did alliteration, mad matador of metaphor. He did internal rhyme. I said, and believe me, all these MCs know what those things are. They may not remember studying in English class. So I was trying to make English devices, you have to learn simile and metaphor and alliteration, all that. I was trying to make it interesting for the kids. And one was, I remember Eminem, I can't even say it, probably be like, raw dog, get your arm gnawed off, take the sod off. But I'm like, raw dog. Yeah. And so I was saying, like, that's internal rhyme, raw dog. Those aren't really rhymes. So I'm teaching these kids, and yeah, I would use Eminem as an example of a great poet. I mean, I'm not a teacher, but if I had the opportunity to teach high school, or if I, my mother always said, because she's an educator, you'd be a good teacher. I said, yeah, but I don't think teachers get paid. I mean, educators should be paid a lot more than they are. But I would just start English class by saying, well, talk about great poets. All right, let's talk about Eminem, and let's talk about, hip hop has taken poetry and made it. They've taken some of the best aspects of poetry and just made it pop culture in a way that some rock and roll people did. Bob Dylan, yeah, he was a poet. He was a poet. But what these guys have done, I mean, I remember I was writing for the New York Times, and this editor, it was right when 8 Mile came out. That had to be 2003 because my daughter was 1. She was born in 2002. And I had been in ciphers, like I'd been in freestyle ciphers where guys were like literally battling in the streets of Brooklyn. And, you could tell sometimes it was going to get heated if you went too far. I'd also been at the MC battle for world supremacy 2 years in a row. And this guy, it was Craig G, but this guy, Supernatural, he was just making up stuff off the dome, and it was insane because you could tell when guys had scripted versus just really making it up. So then that movie came out, and this editor, Danielle, she said, that was unbelievable, that scene at the, the battle. And I said, She said, but they can't, that's not really happening, right? And I said, what do you mean? Well, they're not really making stuff up. I said, of course they are. There's freestyle battles. It's called Coming Off the Dome. You're coming. She
Yeah.
said, well, then these guys are like Shakespeare's. I said, yeah, they're able to make, like, and now everybody knows that. But this was like a white middle class woman who had never seen it. Like, I was privileged because I'm white, although I used to wear a baseball hat and have my goatee, and that I would be taken sometimes for Puerto Rican. That gave me a little pass, like the hood pass they always talk about. But I'd be there, you know, everybody's nodding their heads and guys are just, and you're like, yeah, usually there's some weed involved or whatever, but the cipher, it's going around. Somebody's got it. You take it on, you're dissing each other. Sometimes you're just building. But once you've seen that in real life, if anybody's had that beautiful experience, you're just in love with it. Like, you're just in love with the creativity.
You don't understand somebody could not like it.
Yeah, you'd have to be a real hater of the profanity in hip hop or something, but you cannot knock this culture for what it's done for the English language in terms of, like, I swear to God, people talk about bars, people talk about metaphors, they talk about, and they just know it from hip hop.
Yeah.
You know, like, people really will respect an MC for the metaphors he used. That was such a great line. Jack Harlow has some good ones, but it's like, did a lot of these people give a shit in English class about that stuff? Maybe not. So I always look at, what has this music done? Because hip hop has had a lot of haters. Oh, the misogyny, the homophobia, the this, the that. Yeah, that's all true. It, you know, it's changing. It's not as bad as it was. But I mean, what has it done for literacy? It's done a great service to the world in terms of showing how creative language can be, and how the human voice, it's almost like a jazz instrument. And some of the cadences, I mean, guys of your generation, you really respect the fact that this guy has this cadence, this guy has that cadence. Like Ice-T, I'm sure you appreciated that part of that book where he said, look, I got to be honest, when I came out with 6 a.m, Schoolie D had done PSK, we making that green. So I just came out 6 a.m, police at my door. I gave credit to him. I checked with him, and, you know, I'm not stealing it. It's not a bite. I'm influenced by him. And when he did Colors, King Son had Mythological Rapper, and I forget King Son's record, but obviously Ice, Am a Nightmare Walking. So those cadences are all like, they're what makes a great MC, right? You asked me for top 5 on Twitter, and I was like, I mean, you could go to cadence, you could go to voice. Like Eminem, I know some real hip hop heads in New York, and I'd be blasting. This guy came by one time, and I was blasting that song Rock Bottom because it really touched me. I was going through something rough in my life, and the depth of his pain in that song Rock Bottom. He goes, I love him, but I just don't like the sound of his voice. A lot of people don't like, Eminem's got, it's kind of nasally or something. Yeah. Whereas, you know, Biggie had a lisp, but he made it work somehow, right? Whereas Rakim, to me, there's certain MCs that just have this pure, the tone of their voice and everything's amazing. So I can't make a list of 5 MCs. I'd have to have like 10 categories of like cadence, voice, story. Like I put Ice-T up there with storytelling, not flow, because he's not a complex flow, but he's a great storyteller.
Yeah,
he's a great story.
Yeah, him, Slick Rick, G-Rap, they're Biggie. I mean, they're hip hop's greatest storytellers, without a doubt.
That's the thing. I mean, a guy your age, so I'm old enough to remember it all. But a guy like your age, you have to go literally like digging in the crates. You have to go back and listen to these things that happened before you were born to say, wow, like, yeah, some of that 88, 89 stuff that I thought was corny, it's got some good. So, I mean, when you're your age, you have to be more of a historian to go back and actually care, right?
But it is kind of funny now, just seeing this changing of the guard again, the way people looked at, like, you know, when I was coming up, or, you know, when I was in my formative years, the way people talk about Biggie and Pac. And it's like, I remembered that I was around, but I didn't really like live it. I was a little too young to live it. So it's like, okay, like I hear these stories, but now like when I hear people talk about an Eminem, a 50 Cent, you know, Jay-Z obviously is still huge, but just when he was putting out an album every year, or you know, like Kanye, like I remember when nobody knew who Kanye was. I remember reading the credits to Beanie Siegel's The Truth album and being like, oh, who produced this title track? Because it's really good.
I miss the old, I mean, I was just laughing about she couldn't afford a car, so she named her daughter Alexis. I mean, he had college dropout. Like, I mean, he's become this other guy now. But when I first heard those two records, I mean, the college graduation, college dropout. But I'm old enough to remember when 50 Cent just bum rushed the industry with this song, How to Rob.
Mhm.
And I think it was on a mixtape, or I can't remember. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong. But like, guys were heated. People were
Yeah.
pissed off. He was talking about robbing people. He had a lot. One of the guys he was going to rob, I robbed ODB, but he has no money. So I mean, I'm not getting it right. I rob him, but what would be the point of that, right? It's like fuck. But yeah, I mean, there's a kid. I was just at my gym, and this kid is like, he's not a kid. He's 20. He's going to turn 20, or he's just turned 21, and he worships big. He loves big. He has like. And I said, well, do your friends? That's amazing. Your friend, you guys know that Biggie and Pac. And he goes, no, my friends just like Drake. They think I'm stupid for listening to this old stuff. And I'm like, wow. So, it's like, or Drake and whoever
Yeah.
else is happening now, right? But
Mhm.
it's a whole different vibe. Like Drake is your age. I think he's 35.
Probably
Right?
right in that neighborhood.
Yeah. And I mean, I give him, dude, some of his early records, Take Care. Like, I think what Drake has found is a formula that works. And it's very commercial. Like he has the singing. People have told me they have to not auto tune, but they have to correct his pitch and stuff.
Yeah.
Because I thought he was a great singer, and someone said, but they make sure the records sound great. But it's just too pop for me.
Yeah. I totally respect it, but yeah, I'm in the same boat. I can appreciate what he does, and I think he definitely, like Eminem before him, like Jay-Z before him, but he definitely has kept hip hop exposed to a very wide audience that might otherwise not see it. And so in that respect, I think that's a wonderful thing. But because of some of those things, it doesn't necessarily speak to me quite as much as other stuff. But I can't take anything away from him. I mean, he'll go down. I mean, he's earned his spot in hip hop history without a doubt.
Oh, it's just, and I gotta say, as a Jewish Canadian,
Yeah.
he's, how can I hate on it? Like there's Seth Rogen. There's a few well-known Jewish Canadians right now, but like people laugh and go, yeah, well, Drake had a Jewish mother. He had a bar mitzvah. I mean, but yeah, that was a funny thing actually. This moment where I realized between Drake, The Weeknd, it's like these guys made Canada, which Canada is not that cool. I mean, everybody. So I met this girl in New York. Just to digress, we were doing a lot of digressing, but
You're fine.
and
Don't worry about it.
And I meet her, and she goes, "Oh my God, you're from Canada. Can you take me to the Six? Can you take me to the Six?" And I said, well, first of all, people don't, now they're using it a bit more, but that was kind of a Drake thing to refer to Toronto. They used to call it, in hip hop, they used to call it T-Dot, but or TO, but Drake made the Six. I was like, you do realize you're in New York City, and Toronto is like a small version, and we'll always say we're almost like New York.
Yeah.
I said it takes a special kind of coolness of an artist to make people want to visit your city. Like I think the grunge movement made Beavis and Butthead used to do that. Like Seattle's not the coolest place on earth, but like all those bands from Seattle made it a go-to. But yeah, Drake put Toronto on the map, man. Like he carried his city with him pretty much, like all his boys. Yeah, so respect him for that.
Yeah, and me being of the age I'm too, just like to me, I mean Seth Rogen, of course, but when I was younger, the big Canadians for me were Tom Green and Pam Anderson.
Tom Green, that's another one. I wrote an article about him for the New York Times because he had his pranky MTV show.
Oh yeah,
but he was going on Letterman, and Letterman was his big inspiration. So I was riding around in this limo with Tom Green and the guy from Ottawa that he's right with, and Tom Green was like so nervous. He goes, "I'm terrified to go on David Letterman." And then we all went bowling after his Letterman performance. Letterman used to tape at like 5 p.m. and then air at like 11:30.
Yeah.
So I'm there with Tom Green, and he goes, "Let's all go bowling." So his publicist from MTV, we all went bowling, and I'll never forget watching Tom Green bowl. And he kept saying, "My bowling is really terrible. I think I need some more White Russians." He drank. He was drinking vodka. But yeah, hilarious guy, and I think he's still got a following now. I hope he's doing okay.
I saw him do stand up. I mean, he's fun and energetic, and he's still. He's changed, but he's still Tom Green. So
that's the other thing. He was in a rap group, and they had this song called Spadina Bus, which is about this bus route in Toronto. I can't remember the name of the group, But yeah, he started off as a white MC, and then he transitioned into doing like the pranks but pranking his own parents. Like the way he treated his parents was just hilarious. Or he'd find dead moose on the side.
Or I love
Whatever
how
road.
that's with his assistant Glenn or whatever his name was.
Yeah, that was the guy. That's
Yeah.
his best friend.
Yeah.
Glenn and I. Yeah, so it's Glenn, me, and Tom. So this is how cool my life was. I mean, cool, but it was like I just get these calls. Hey, this guy Tom Green from Canada, you're Canadian. Do you want to go? Just follow him. And I'd write this column in the New York Times. It was like a night out with LL Cool J, a night out with Tom Green, Eve. I remember the rapper Eve. Remember her? They would give me all the hip hop or whatever related stuff, and it was just a blast because I would just go hang out with these people and then just chronicle it'd be like a 1,200 word, 1,500 word little column about a night out with this celebrity. And I mean, I met Prince one night. I met Mike Tyson. It was just, I mean, yeah, that's a whole other story. But yeah, that was Ananda Lewis, this amazing VJ from MTV. I think I got a picture of her.
Oh, I remember. I remember her.
Yeah, so I wrote this article about Ananda, and I just because she was like, beautiful, but she was also really smart, and she'd come from BET's Teen Summit. So I went and hung out with her, and she was friends with. So through her, I met Prince, Omar Epps. We were at this party one night, and I'm just there as the reporter. So I'm with Ananda Lewis in a banquet, a VIP area in a nightclub. I'm nobody. Like I'm the guy from the New York Times, right? I'm with Ananda Lewis. Prince is there. In comes Derek Jeter in our same booth, Mike Tyson, and then Jennifer Lopez and Diddy, who were a couple at that time, sat down, and we're all in this. And like I'm just sitting there going, "This is the craziest collection of people." First of all, Prince hardly ever talks, and rest in peace. What a musical genius! But I had to get up and go to take a leak, right?
Yeah.
And there was this velvet rope, and there was this crush of people. This was a VIP section, and then there was like a separate VIP, the VIP within the VIP. And I got to get out, and I'm telling the bouncer, the doorman, whatever guy, I was like, "Hey, will you let me back in? I'm not famous, but I'm sitting with those guys." He said, "Okay, I'll let you back in." And everybody's like, "What's going on back there?" And I was like, "Nothing." Like the music was so loud. No, everyone was just sitting there, and there wasn't much going on. But it was like this collection of celebrity. Like, when are you going to see Puff Daddy, Jennifer Lopez, Mike Tyson, Derek Jeter, Prince, and Ananda Lewis sitting in one booth?
That's quite a gathering.
And then people were looking at me like, "Well, who the hell are you? Are you somebody's manager or accountant or something? Like, what the fuck?"
What time is it?
Okay, we have some fabulous live music later on, but right now, here's the kind I prefer.